I can see a few questions already coming up, so let's quickly get into this. First of all, welcome everyone. This is our first Rise for YC session for S24. As all of you may know, that Y Combinator has two seasons that they select for in a year. So the current one is summer 24. What Rise for YC does is we try and help applicants who are applying to YC get through their process. So this includes multiple things. The first of all being, these sessions that we hold, so you can speak directly to industry experts and YC alumni, learn about, their insights, their experiences, learn from them about how their process was. And of course, every startup journey is unique. So every insight, every experience would be unique. So this is just to kind of give you an understanding of what it has been like for other YC alumni as well. Apart from sessions, we also do one-on-one application reviews. So if you have your application ready, you can submit it to us for a review, and our in-house panelists will review these applications for you and help you understand how you can make your application stand out. So for these reviews, you want to be in the top 1% to stand out at YC. So how do you get there? That's what we try to do while we're doing application reviews. The link is in the chat. If you already have your application ready to review, feel free to submit it. Our experts will get back in 3 to 5 days on your application. If you do get a call back from YC and you are selected for an interview, you can also reach out to us because we help you set up mock interviews. These mock interviews are basically practice interviews simulated by YC alumni because they have been there, they have done that, they know what it's like to sit in that room with the partners answering those questions. So they would simulate that conversation for you and help you prepare better for your interview. Apart from that, we also have a bunch of resources for YC, which were again handpicked. These include sample applications, demo videos, tools and platforms that you can use, which are solely built to help YC applicants. So that's a brief on Rise for YC. In case you haven't signed up yet, this program is completely free of charge. So there is a link in the chat. Feel free to sign up and you will get the entire program guide with links to everything with an understanding of what each section is. There is also a YouTube channel where you can look at all of the previous Rise for YC sessions. And today we are now here with Anand Krishna. He is also a part of the Rise community and he is the founder of Inkle. Anand has played a very important role in our past Rise for YC seasons as well, where we have helped 9 startups get into YC. So Anand has not only reviewed applications, he has also helped with a lot of mock interviews and done sessions as well. So thank you so much for joining us again, Anand. We are always so glad to have you on our side. And welcome. And yeah, the floor is all yours.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Manik and Cheryl, for inviting me again and again. And yeah, I hope that since you keep inviting me, that I'm roughly saying what you want me to say.
Absolutely.
Do tell me if I'm not. Okay, good. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Anand Krishna. I'm founder and CEO of Inkle. Inkle is, in fact, let me put our website right here, inkle.io. Our company automates tax and accounting for early stage US startups. I'm currently in San Francisco, but I live in Bangalore in HSR Layout, where I work also with my team of about 35 folks. But yeah, generally I spend about a month here every few months. And you've caught me at a time when I'm here, but I'm delighted. And in fact, recently I've had some interactions with a few YC partners, including Tom Blomfeld, the founder of Monzo, who invited a bunch of British YC alums. I'm British by birth, to come over to the YC office and experience some really interesting interactions with the partners. And there I got a little bit more clarity, and it actually changed some of my feelings about what I'm about to tell you. There is actually no rocket science or what should I say, secrets about what I'm about to tell you. It's all quite obvious. It's widely published. YC, in fact, makes it a point to widely publish it. YC is not a normal investor. They are a accelerator, of course. They're not the typical venture capital fund, but in fact, they are a venture capital fund. In fact, you'll see in the publication today called The Information. It's a really good publication. It's super expensive, but if you see there today, they're raising three new funds. So they're a VC, like every other VC. They raise funds from LPs and they invest in startups. But there are some caveats to that, which I'll go through just now. My background, born and raised in London, moved to India about more than 10 years ago now. This is my third startup, or fourth, or fifth, in fact, if you look at it. It depends how you look at it, with pivots, I guess. My third one was a YC-backed company, and that was summer 17 batch. So it's been a few years now since I did my original application form and interview and went through the process, but I still remember a lot, and I do well over 100 application reviews and mock interviews and so on per year, I guess. So that's where I get a lot of my science from, and I hope it's helpful, and I hope it's not um, misleading you in any way. But let me dive straight in. The first thing that I would say is that so I'm going to focus a lot on the application process, not on the interview process. In fact, I have another, kind of set of information for the interview process, which is quite different from what I'm discussing today. This is more for the application process. Cheryl, is that okay if I leave the interview process to another occasion? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thanks, Bunny. So the application process has become increasingly difficult. When I applied, perhaps 2017, there was apparently, about 10,000 applications. Now there's close to 30,000 applications. Of course, the batch size has also increased substantially, but then it decreased also. So in the old days, 15 years ago, I guess it was the batch of 10 companies in Boston. Then when they moved to the West Coast, it zoomed up to almost 100 companies in my batch 10 years later in 2017. Now it's almost 300 companies. But there was a period during COVID when it was 450 companies, right? In terms of the percentage applications that are accepted, it's fallen well below 1%, right? It's closer to 0.5% apparently, right? Or maybe just over 0.5%, maybe about 0.2%, 1%, about 0.6% chance of getting accepted. So what can you do to really increase those odds, right? So it's less than 1 in 100 chance of you getting accepted, right? So my response to everyone when people ask me this, and I'm no oracle on this, but I just give some things from my own experience, is that you can just increase your probabilities, right? You can't guarantee anything in life, of course, but especially this, when the odds are stacked against you. So the only thing you can really do is increase your probability of getting accepted, right? So I'm going to go through some of those things that you can do now, which I think can increase your probability of getting at least an interview, right? Let me start with probably 7 factors, right? And I'm going to write these down for you, right? And then I'll start discussing them all in more detail. So here, I hope you can see my screen. Cheryl, can you see my screen? In fact, let me pull that
Yes,
out.
yes.
Okay, 1 second. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Let me refresh this 1 second. Okay, I'll share this with you later, Cheryl. Perhaps you can distribute it. So the first thing, 7 factors, right? So let's say factors. So the first thing I think you can do is just a super application form, right? And I'll go through what that means. And of course, it's not the only thing you can do, although one might think from the title of this Zoom meeting that we're only going to discuss that. But actually, there's a bunch of other things that you can do, which really helps. So I'm going to go through many of those just now as well. But we'll go through the application form in great detail, of course, and what it means. I personally think one of the really impactful things you can do is a super video, right? The video is surprisingly impactful, and we'll go through why. Technical co-founder, right? Ridiculously important, and we'll go through why. Do startup school, right? They love their own product, and I'll go through that. Alumni recommendations, right? And then traction can also help, and speak to customers and make it obvious that you've spoken to customers, right? Now, if you do these 7 things, and there's probably a bunch more, I think your probability of getting at least to an interview increase substantially from 1 in 100 to roughly 1 in 10, right? And then you wonder, well, how do I make sure I'm not in the 9 in 10 that do get rejected regardless, right? I think the answer to that is you can't do much. It's a bit of almost a lottery in that way that YC admits themselves that they get it wrong a lot of the time, and often there's nothing wrong with your startup. It's just that there's just a sheer volume of it, and therefore, what can you do to keep getting on their radar? Keep applying, right? And this is one thing which I think people really, really miss out on, right? They get disillusioned or discouraged by the first rejection, and they don't keep reapplying. And I always say to everyone, please, for God's sake, just keep reapplying. It costs you, a couple of hours maybe at most, right? Every 6 months. And in fact, let me start right at the start. Okay? So super application form. The application form itself is probably a 1 hour project, right? If you do it fast, probably a 2 hour project if you do it nicely, right? One thing that surprises people often is that there's no deck, right? Right? Everyone assumes that there's going to be a deck, but there isn't. There is no deck in the YC application form. In fact, there never has been. YC doesn't like decks at this stage, at least. Even on demo day, when we went for demo day, and still now, it's one slide, right? It's 60 seconds, one slide, 3 bullet points. That's it. No long deck, right? No demo, no deck, etc. So just bear this in mind. It's all geared to that 60 seconds on demo day, really, at the end of the 3 months. But a lot of what they do in that period is actually something you can show during the application form stage. So the important things which I think I'd like to go through on the application form are highlighted already by Raise the Pay Rise. And I picked out this article because I really liked it, which I'm guessing was written by Shah and Manik and co. Or in fact, I'm sorry, maybe some of one of these.
Yeah,
alum-
we coordinated with Daniel Kang, who was also another
Okay.
YC alumni,
Oh,
and got him on board to write this article for us.
thank you. And I love this article, so I'm picking it out here. Oops. Someone's sharing this screen. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay, so do I understand it? Do I like it? Can I back it? Right. This is so critically important that people get this wrong all the time. And I love this how Daniel's described this. Help them understand because frankly, when I read an application form, I read a lot of them. Often I really fail to understand what the product is, what the problem statement is, or what the startup does. And there's a very famous drawing in the YC lobby, right? Which is the picture of this kind of a caricature of this geek with spectacles looking like strangely at a device saying, but what does it do? And this is a very famous photograph or caricature in the lobby there. And it so represents everything that they hammer into you, right? Which is that people often try to describe what they're doing and they get it just go off on a tangent or make it too complex or make it too long. And it's just impossible for someone to even understand what you actually do. So I think that happens a lot in the first few application form paragraphs. Folks I've seen have described it in so much detail, so much length, so much, kind of broad terms that it's just such a difficult thing to follow what you do. And so at the interview stage, also, I recommend this is try and distill it all into one single line, right? And in fact, they make you do that in the application form anyway. The brevity is the key, right? Brevity. Brevity helps humans understand because it's difficult for humans to have a long attention span, right? So brevity is the absolute key here. Um, the second thing is, I think a lot of people just use really poor grammar, spelling, punctuation, wording, vocabulary, etc. I think that's super easy to fix. Download Grammarly, the free version's great, and just use that, right? And get friends to read over it as well. But this is something that I see time and time again, full of spelling mistakes, punctuation mistakes, capitalization mistakes, vocabulary mistakes, and it's just so easy to solve, right? Even if English is not your first language, there's really no excuses to getting this one wrong, and it can often just result in applications getting rejected, and it's just so unfortunate because everything else may be spot on. So for God's sake, please do install Grammarly and get some friends to check over your form. Don't expect, like alumni to sit and correct every single small mistake in the form. That's not the right way. But do get friends and family to check it once over. That's a really common one that I see, and it's probably, in fact, 1/3 of applications that I read have some form of mistake in them that it's just too super easy. And that gives you a signal as a reader, like, oh, they're careless or they're lazy or they're just, like that. Coming back to brevity, you don't have to write long prose sentences, right? Prose is sentences or paragraphs. Bullet points, of course, is different. So prose, I think, is it the way to go, right? I don't agree that you should go into bullet points. I've seen people do that a lot. I think that they expect prose, but that doesn't mean the whole thing has to be like War and Peace, like thousands of lines. I think you keep it brief, right? Imagine they're getting 30,000 applications. There's probably now about 15 group partners, and each one has to read all of them. Um, so really, frankly, they have a bunch of tooling, they have software, but each one is individually read by humans. They have, in fact, internally 5 or 6 engineers that read through all of this stuff. Sorry, that construct software that does also read through this stuff, does analytics, all that stuff. But humans do read the application form, right? Without fail. So please bear that in mind that the brevity is the key thing. If it's too long, and I would say there's no word limitations on a lot of those questions, but just use your common sense, right? You don't need to put more than 5 to 10 lines on each question there, right? And some of them are super brief, so you can keep it even less, right? In fact, don't go to like super brief, like 1, 2 lines, because that just shows laziness and it shows you're not making an effort and probably it's a last minute application, right? Um, so please be super cognizant of that fact, and just try to keep it well kind of short of these long essays that they often see super difficult to follow, really like too much information, etc. Right? Okay, coming back to the form. So we discussed brevity, right? We discussed checking, right? Spell check, grammar check, etc. Right? We discussed, in fact, the difference between prose versus bullet points. I prefer but prose, of course. I think inside the application form, if you read the application form super carefully, and this is something that I go to do in the interview, kind of marks as well. Um, it often there is an operative word, right? A what or a why or who. And people often forget that operative word. So if you read the question super carefully, you realize actually that's the question they're asking. And then at least half the time, I see applicants writing things that are not related to the operative word of the question. So when you're answering and you've written some words, read back the application form, read back the question and think, actually, did I actually answer that question? Or did I answer something slightly different? And I think you'll find half the time you probably answered something slightly different. So feel free to slash it, cut it. And often people think, oh, I've written so much, it looks really nice, I don't want to cut it. And that's when you fall into the trap. And that trap is padding, right? More and more. It gets too long and you don't answer the exact question concisely. So be super brief to the point and answer the operative word question, right? That is often something which I think a lot of people get wrong. The video, I think that the video is ridiculously important. It doesn't have to be high production quality. People get this really, really wrong, right? Just like I'm sitting right here, a Zoom in your room and with your co-founders. It doesn't have to be in an office. Doesn't have to be anything funky. It doesn't have to be high resolution. Doesn't have to be a high definition camera or a spotlight studio kind of lighting. Nothing like that. They could not care less about all that. All they care about is the communication of the founders, right? So make it brief. Try to sit together, right? That's really important. Um, if you can, right? I think it makes a visual difference, right? And I think some of the things is, like you can do is simply right is get the I'm sorry, I wasn't sharing my screen, is just low production quality. Don't worry too much about it, but sound and lighting, right? The sound, this is perfectly fine. I'm using a MacBook Pro. I find that a lot of Windows laptops or headsets, wired headsets, the sound quality is so muffled, you can't hear half of what the person's saying. They think that you can hear it, but you can't, right? So listen to it 3, 4 times and just think clarity, right? It's already hard for these folks who are all Westerners, born and raised in the US, most of whom have never been to India, right? And most of whom are not used to that strong Indian accent. So for God's sake, use a super mic, speak slowly, right? Speak slowly, almost a third slower than you'd normally speak. Accentuate um, certain words, and don't use Indianized jargon, right? Like lakhs, crores, rupees, etc. Right? That's a very common mistake I see because they're not going to get it at all, right? And if they do get it, it's not necessary because they want to standardize everything according to what they're seeing across other application forms, right? So the production quality of the video is not important, as I said, but everything in the content, body language helps. Speak slower, right? Be a little enthusiastic, yeah, and be a little passionate about what you're saying. Don't be slow and boring. Don't be yeah, and do not read off the screen, right? This is something they always point out. Do not read off the screen because it sounds like that. It sounds like a robot. It sounds like you're reading literally off the screen, and they can see your eyes moving across the screen, reading the screen, and it's terrible. And they really detest that. Yeah, they want it to be natural. It's a conversation, right? Just get up in front of a video and practice it a couple of times. Don't go more than 5 to 10 takes. Um, and just be improvised to some extent, but keep it brief. So you both introduce yourself. In fact, there's plenty of information about what the video should contain. Do not go over 60 seconds, right? Very often I see 1 minute, 2 minute videos and 3 minute. No, this is the uh, strict limitation, right? Um, I think that the demo video, right, which is also there, right, is super important, right? Can be longer, right? We're talking, a couple of minutes, but don't go more than 2 to 3 minutes, right? I think that's perfectly fine to show what this is, right? Now, what is the demo video, right? I think the demo video is not a deck, right? It is not a deck. And this is something I always see people present a deck. YC really doesn't like that for sure. I know that for sure. This is ideally just something that shows what your product does, right? You could, argue that there are some products that you can't show, right? Like for example, I don't know, let's say hardware you're working on and it's not built yet, right? Or you're a biotech company, or um, I don't know, you're building an API product and there's no dashboard quite yet, something like that. But there has to be at least something that you can discuss, right? And if you have those excuses, then of course it's fine to present some photographs or some designs or some perhaps some flows or some architecture. But if you don't have those excuses, then I really think you need to show your software, right? And even as ugly as it looks, as basic as it looks. In fact, they prefer that it's not polished, right? Because then you're focusing on the wrong things at this stage if it's too polished. So, so frankly, you need to show a demo of what it does, right? And an example might be, let's say, Twilio when they did their first, kind of version, they would have showed, oh, look, you can type an SMS here, and it appears right here on your phone, and that's amazing. Like no one had built that at that stage, right? Or someone had, but Twilio just made it super easy to send messages and phone calls over an API, and they showed that, right? And so you can just show that as a part of a demo, right? I would use Loom if it's software. I'd minimize your video to the bottom left corner as a circular image, and it should be ideally the CEO presenting. And so on, and then maximize the software, ideally a dashboard. Don't go over 2 minutes, right? Okay, cool. The team, right? Let's come to that, right? You know, I often say if you want to increase your chances of getting accepted, the first and the most important thing you need to do is find a technical co-founder, right? Um, Cheryl, Manik, I'm not able to follow the chat while I'm speaking, so if there's anything super important, please feel free to interrupt me here.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think we'll just pick those questions in the end.
okay, sure. Cheryl, I'm not always sharing my screen. I think you said you can't see my screen. I will keep sharing my screen when I need to, but just if I'm typing something and I forget to share, please remind me. Okay, technical co-founder. Crazy, crazy, crazy important. Um, and yeah, I think people often misunderstand this or underestimate this. If you're like me, non-tech, When I started Inkle, I was solo. So you're really at a huge disadvantage. Um, I see now, having done YC and having done startup school after YC, in fact, why it's so important. Yeah, just the chances of you getting accepted as a non-tech solo founder is like close to zero. It's already close to zero. It's 1%, but now it's even closer to zero, right? The chances of you getting accepted as a solo tech founder are slightly higher. Right? They do accept solo founders. In fact, they've done plenty of video content explaining that they take solo founders, right? But if you're really trying to increase your chances, I think you team up, right? And then you wonder, well, do I want to share my equity with someone? Well, that's a much longer conversation. The answer to that is a complex thing, but I think it just makes incredible sense for you to split. And they do look for a split, right? So this is another thing. They do look for a fair split. Why do they look for a fair split? Um, so they look for a fair split because they think that the most of the journey is down the road, right? They think that the vast majority of what you're about to encounter is not just the 3 months or the 6 months or the guy who came up with the idea, the girl who came up with the idea. It's 10 years journey ahead, right? And frankly, in high likelihood, you're going to pivot, right? Many YC companies pivot. And so the reality is, for God's sake, please just try to keep the split fair, right? We're talking, if it's two pairs, if it's two founders, then half-half is the perfect way to do it. They often understand that, okay, it might not be quite half-half, maybe 55-45, 60-40, but don't go to 80-20 or 90-10 because it really doesn't make sense. And it's a red flag. And they really, really very often point this out that equity split doesn't make sense to them, right? What do you do if there's a late co-founder? Well, again, if there's a late co-founder and you're only 6 months in and you haven't got any traction, and you're about to pivot, frankly, there's no real excuse not to give the late co-founder a larger chunk than you would like to give. So this it really sings a lot to what you think is the journey ahead and how much value you place on each other, etc. Coming back to technical co-founder, they are ridiculously emphatic on, can this team build the MVP alone? No dev shop, no contractors, no engineers, right? Can these 2, 3, 4 founders, 5 founders, or even one founder build the MVP herself or himself, right? Or themselves, right? And the reality is, most of the time, probably, out of 30,000 applicants, I think they'll find that probably 5 to 10,000 of those companies or teams that apply cannot build themselves, right? And have not built anything themselves, which, is a massive red flag. I mean, you wonder why, because in 10 years, you're going to raise money, you're going to hire engineers, and you like said, why do you need to know that you can build it again? So this is what they always emphasize: the first few versions, the first few months, the first few pivots, the first few ideations, iterations. You really, really have to show that you can do it yourselves, right? As a team, there's nothing that can replace that, right? Not a dev shop, not a team of contractors, not a team of 5 engineers, and you're just, doing the Figma screens, right? Nothing can care enough about the engineering, the code, as much as a technical co-founder, right? And if you're not a technical co-founder, find one, because that is probably going to quadruple your chances of getting accepted, right? Getting accepted to an interview, and then it's yours to lose. In fact, that's another theme I'll discuss. Everything I'm discussing today is that how to get an interview. Once you get the interview, it's a whole different ball game, and it's yours to lose, right? And I'll go through that another time. Do startup school, right? Startupschool.org. They love it. They love their own product. There's all the modules. There's a super co-founder matching tool. That's actually where I found my co-founder, Ranveer. And I did actually YC Startup School after I did YC Core, right? The physical program. And frankly, I thought some aspects of the startup school were super well organized and very well presented, even more so than the offline program, some aspects of it. So I really strongly recommend do startup school, and do it with the same email ID that you're applying with, right? You have a Hacker News username and password. Use the same email ID, right? And apply it, finish the modules, finish the content, show that you're iterating on Startup School, interact on the forums. 43% of one of the recent batches came through Startup School. 40, like almost half of the batch, right? It says so much. They love their own product, right? So you might think you don't need to do startup school, but you do, right? Everyone does. I did YC startup school after I did YC core. It didn't make sense, but I did it and I loved it and it was brilliant and I learned a lot from it, right? Okay. Alumni recommendations. Yeah, you don't need 22 alumni recommendations. You need two or three at most alumni recommendations from people you know or people you get to know, and hopefully they're positive and hopefully they're brief and hopefully they make sense about why this team, why now, right? Not like oh, Anand's a great guy. That's not what they want to see. They want to see something a little bit more. So the alumni recommendation form, anyone can see it, anyone can apply. It doesn't have to be an alum actually, right? But it can actually, ideally, it's an alum because the alumni recommendations get flagged. Um, but it doesn't have to be. Okay. So to get 2 to 3 alumni recommendations, right? You don't need to, maybe 4 or 5 if you want. Getting like a dozen is not going to necessarily have an incremental huge impact, right? I think probably influential, alumni recommendations make a lot of sense, but only if those people know you, right? Are you going to go straight to Harshil Mathur, the CEO of Rize, and ask him for a recommendation when you've never met him before and you either has no clue what you're building and just email him and say, I need a recommendation? No, it doesn't really make sense, right? I think you need to get to know Harshil. You need to meet offline or online, and he's perfectly available. Or you need to get to know some of the other alums, right? And try to get them to understand your product, your team, etc. Traction. I think traction is important. There are many teams that apply that have no revenue, no traction, and they still get in. It's more so than ever, in fact. I think there was a change, very early on, probably 15 years ago. Most teams didn't have no traction, no revenue, no product even, and got in. Then when roughly in the mid-teens, late teens, you had to have something, right? When I did it, you had to have something going. But now even more so, they're saying, like I think it's crazy, like something like half the companies don't have any revenue when they apply, right? And so it's just an idea often. Ideally, it's not just an idea, right? But now increasingly so they're accepting just ideas, right? In fact, there was this famous experiment they did 2 batches ago where they said you can apply without ideas, and they said they asked alumni to spread the word. Tell the applicant to write it, no idea, right? And you could still apply as long as you had a co-founder, or if you didn't have a co-founder, you could apply and say, look, I really don't have an idea what I want to build, but I want to apply. And they tried that experiment. I don't think they continue that experiment now, but it's interesting to see, right? So ideally, you have an idea. Ideally, you have some traction. You got off your backside, you got some users, you surveyed, you got some LOIs, you got some pilots. It's unpaid or paid, doesn't matter. Do something. And the most famous example of this, of course, is FanPay, who did like a little spinny wheel game. And I think this was like a couple of years ago. They just got 20,000 kids to use it in 48 hours, and they could win 10 rupees if they just spun the wheel. And that just showed we can get the audience, right? And their product was targeted at school kids, right? So naturally, the YC believe that if they can do it now, they'll do it. They'll be able to do it once we fund them. So things like that. Just do a simple hack experiment. You could ask, well, if my product's not ready, what do I do? Get a waitlist going, right? Put up a splash page, get a landing page, get a waitlist going, get some FOMO going, get some interest. And if it's a B2B product, even waitlists are possible then, but LOIs, unpaid is also fine. Pilots, just something happening that shows that you're not just another applicant that applied with absolutely nothing and just an idea, right? That said, it is okay to apply with just an idea, apparently, right? Although I don't recommend it, but some YC partners have been recently saying that. I think it's much harder, right? And if you want to ideally increase your chances, you have some traction going, right? Speak to customers. They really emphasize this. Crazy important, right? I remember doing YC, and all they do for literally like three months, 90 days, it's hammer into your head every day. Speak to customers all day, code all night. Speak to customers all day, code all night. Speak to customers all day, code all night. And they once they hammer it into you, you never forget it. It's like a mantra, right? And frankly, I think it's just so true, right? And people don't really, even now, I don't listen to that little advocate in my mind, thinking speak to customers. Like, I think I'm speaking to customers, but I'm not. If I really think about it, I'm not. I'm hearing their problems, but I'm not speaking to them. I'm hearing that maybe they have a bug or they have a complaint to me, but that's not speaking to them. Speak to customers proactively. And I think if you do that, your application form gets about 100 times better, right? And there's a really important question in the application form which says, what do you understand that others do not? Right? What do you understand which your competitors do not? And I think that is one of the super key questions that they ask. And here I recommend something like a light bulb moment, right? What's a light bulb moment? It's the same thing in the interview. A light bulb moment is a moment where the reader or the interviewer perhaps is reading it and listening to you and says, "Oh, I didn't think of that before," right? Oh, like that's so curious, that's so interesting, right? And frankly, if you can get that light bulb moment, your half your work is done, right? It's almost a guarantee that you will not be rejected, and at least they'll give you a shot, right? So 1, 2 light bulb moments can really transform your chances. And those light bulb moments don't come from you, right? They come from your customers, right? And so you got to ask your customers things, and then frankly, those light bulb moments have to be inspirational, have to be unique, and have to be like not generic, like, oh well, you know, we do things and the customers, competitors do this. It can't be generic. It has to be super unique to your industry, your product, your problem statement, right? And I think you'll realize once you've written it, once you've heard your customers say it, you'll realize actually what that light bulb moment is. Metrics, right? Something I've missed out in the document here, which I'm going to just talk about is talk about your metrics, stories, examples, snippets, right? These snippets are something you should sprinkle throughout. Don't make bland, kind of long, boring, approximate, generalizations, right? If you do that, like it's really hard to follow an application, right? Sprinkle metrics, stories, examples, quotes, right? Sprinkle quotes in to your application form the same way you would with a interview as well, right? And this can make all the difference in a great application form. Speak to customers we discussed. Keep reapplying. Why do you keep reapplying? And use the same email ID, right? And don't try to create new. And a lot of people try to hack this. They think, oh, I've been blacklisted, right? That's complete nonsense. You haven't been blacklisted because you applied once and you got rejected. In fact, they want you to keep reapplying, right? They want to see the iterative thinking that you matured your thinking, or you tried something different, or you did linear ideation, or you pivoted, or you got a new co-founder. They want to see that. They want to see a story. You're never going to be blacklisted just because you applied like 10. In fact, a good friend of mine from Skilling in Chennai applied, I think, a dozen times and got in on the 12th attempt, right? Frankly, I think you really need to just keep applying. Don't be disheartened, right? It's 1% chance of getting accepted. Don't be disheartened. Keep reapplying every 6 months religiously, few hours it takes, and I think you'll find that that history really builds up. You might get 2, 3 times, and then you get an interview, and it takes apparently on average 3 attempts to get an interview, or for the people that did apply, right? For the people that did get interviewed, they've applied 3 times on average before they get an interview. Many people get it first time, of course. The interview, but just keep reapplying using the same email address, or in fact, the same Hacker News ID, not the same email address, but the same Hacker News account, right? And even it doesn't matter if you lost a co-founder, added a co-founder, it's no problem, right? They see that all the time, right? Apply in advance, right? I'm going to finish on this. A lot of people, including myself, applied at the last second, right? 1 minute before the deadline. Just apply well in advance. It's first come, first serve. They interview your applications in the order that they're received, and apply early is one of the biggest advantages you can have. Of course, that ideally you should have something to apply with and some traction and co-founder. It's all in place a month before and you apply, and I think there's a month to go. But if you don't, then just wait a couple of weeks, sure. But don't apply 1 second before the deadline, because that's when the huge surge of applicants come in, and then you're likely to get pushed into the back of the queue, and then of course it's going to take time to read your application. So apply really early if you can. Apply a few weeks before if you can. Don't leave it to the last second. Yeah. Okay. I am gonna stop there. Cheryl, how should I just share this document on um on the chat perhaps? I think that's
Yes.
probably good.
No.
But yeah, Please feel free to ask questions, folks. In fact, Cheryl, is that the way we're going to do now?
Yes, that's what we're going to do. Folks, there are a lot of questions in the Q&A section. Please go and upvote the questions that you want answered the most, because I see a lot of questions, but we have very little time. So quickly go and upvote all of these questions so that we know which ones to pick up. I will give you
Okay.
a minute to do that.
I've just shared in the Zoom chat this document.
Yeah.
Folks, please feel free to, Cheryl, could you just check that it's accessible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And I've made it downloadable, so feel free to download it and do what you want with it. Edit it and add to it, etc. I'll keep trying to add some more notes here over time. Let's dive in. Should I take them from the Zoom Q&A?
Yes. Let's start with the Zoom Q&A. Meanwhile, I'll pick up questions even from the chat, but let's finish up the Zoom Q&A quickly.
Yeah, folks, it's super difficult for me to follow the chat, to post in the Zoom Q&A. Yeah. If you want a question asked, post in the Zoom Q&A. Right? It's really hard to follow the chat. Okay. Let's take these at the top. Dev is asking, is YC really biased against startups with single founders? No, they're not really biased. They've spoken many times, they accept startups. I think 1 in 10 YC companies has a single founder, right? So they're not really biased against. I think there's just a world of uphill struggle, right? And it's a scientific-based logic that they follow. Starting up is crazy hard. It's a 10-year journey, and there's odds are stacked against you. Why make it so much harder by not having a co-founder, right? And there's a bit of key person risk as well, but that's separate. So I think just bear that in mind. They've tried to have a co-founder, but if you can't, it's perfectly fine. And if you're technically capable of building the product yourself, that makes the world of difference, right? If you cannot code, right, and what that means is you must be able to code to be technically capable of building the product yourself. If you cannot code, and of course, I'm assuming your company startup is a software company. If it's like a D2C product, you can't code and you're a solo business founder. Yeah, I mean, that's a long shot, right? But if you're building a dev tool and you're solo tech founder, then I think, yeah, apply by yourself, right? I hope that answers your question, Dev. Okay. Anonymous says, I'd like to know about the necessity of being a technical co-founder. Yeah. So if there's a deep tech and can be built using no-code tools, yeah. I think I answered that already. Like ideally, you know, one has to see if the product can be built entirely with no-code tools, right? You could argue that you can use some drag and drop, tool to build the whole thing, like Bubble or something like that. But then, yeah, it's harder to have a moat, I think, and they realize that. Ideally, they want you to have something which has, like a software component that you've written yourself. And if it's really deep tech and it's like the whole thing is built on AI and you don't need to necessarily code, but there are data scientists in the team, I think that makes a difference, right? As long as one of you is that person, that technical person that's not necessarily a software engineer, but is capable of doing a lot of deep tech, then I think that makes a difference. But again, these are all kind of my own, ideas on the idea. I would rather follow YC's ideas on the idea and read their articles on this because they talk a lot about this, right? Having a technical co-founder. I think to summarize, it really, really helps to have a technical co-founder who can code software, right? So yeah, again, it's everything I've said so far is about increasing your chances from 1 in 100, so 1%, to roughly 10%, right? And then it's still 9 out of 10 is still chances that you'll get refused, right? What can you do to increase it to 20%, 30%? Follow every single one of my recommendations on that document, and you'll probably increase your chances from 1% to 20%, right? And then, still, if you get rejected, just keep reapplying, and there's a good chance that you'll get accepted after a few attempts. And then, of course, once you get the interview, that's a whole different ballgame, as I said. Can you submit multiple applications for multiple ideas? No, you cannot, not in the same batch. I'm sorry, I skipped the question, sorry. If any company is selected in YC, when company receive funding after completion of YC, or can we receive instantly selected in YC? Yes, the moment you get a yes, right? Which is about a month after the application deadline. Hopefully, you'll get the interviews done, etc. If and they'll call you back within a day usually, and sometimes within a few days. The moment you get accepted after the interview, they immediately make the funding available to you. From India, it's slightly more difficult. It's another topic about structuring your entity. They don't invest in Indian entities, so you'd have to flip to the US. That itself can take the whole 3 months of the period that you're in the batch. So unfortunately, it takes time from India, the flip process. So, but the funding they make available to you as soon as possible. In the meantime, they give you a loan, etc. So I wouldn't worry about that, but they'll do their best to make it. If you're just a Delaware C corp already, they can literally wire the money within days. So, or if you haven't formed, if you have formed already, you have 2 years of trading history, they have to do a bit of due diligence, etc. Like that. Okay. Can I submit multiple applications for multiple ideas? I strongly recommend against that. That's just as far as I know, it's just a no-go, right? Um, find one idea and ideally one co-founder, or sorry, a team, one idea, and make some progress on it, make some impact on it from all the things that I've shown you. Focus on that one idea, right? That's what I would do. If I show multiple applications, it shows I'm not focused, and you have to kind of be a little focused here, right? How can I get my app reviewed? I have submitted the form
Anand,
already.
there's
Yeah.
a question that most people have upvoted.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I
Yeah,
missed it.
yeah. So it says, even if our application is strong and our startup idea is innovative, is it possible that YC has already allocated their investments for a particular sector in this round, which would make it less likely for them to fund startups outside that sector?
No. No, yeah, I get what you're saying. So, for example, if there are two applicants or more who are applying to something that they've already funded, are you likely to get rejected because they've already funded that idea? Yeah, is that what that's saying? I think that's what that's saying. No, absolutely not. YC is famous for backing multiple startups in the same batch with the same idea. So it's quite unique in that way. They have no issues with conflicting ideas in the same portfolio, the same batch even. Absolutely no problem at all. Yeah.
I think it's more about if YC is backing a lot of, say, Gen AI startups in a particular season, does it make it less likely for them to fund startups outside of the sector?
No, it's the same thing. Okay, so my initial response was idea specific, sector specific, the same thing. What they've famously said recently about AI is that it's not that they decided to go after AI, it's that they saw that the smart founders were building in AI, and therefore they started accepting more of AI companies because they're going after smart founders. Right? Not that they suddenly said, okay, we're only accepting AI startups. That's not the way they do things. And in fact, they said that explicitly in the video, right? In a recent video. So I strongly recommend you apply it regardless of your sector and your idea. Doesn't matter, right? They are not going to blacklist you or exclude you because they've already got 5 drone startups in this batch and you're a drone startup, right? That's absolutely not the case, right? Just apply.
All
Okay.
right. Next question is, in case of a pivot, the new
Mhm.
product could be in an early stage. So do we wait for traction for the new one before applying?
Um, the in
If
case
they
for
pivoted.
yeah. So this happens a lot. You know, I think you just have to apply, right? You can show that you pivoted recently, right? Don't go too much into the previous idea. But I think it makes sense to and this is why I just keep saying apply, apply, apply. Right? Doesn't matter if you pivoted, doesn't matter if you are too early. There's no such thing as too early with YC, right? Although having said that, I did say, a large chunk of the applications have nothing apart from just an idea or a PowerPoint. Ideally, you want to do something. You want to get, and then frankly, you have plenty of time now, right? Cheryl, when's the deadline? I think it's April, right?
Yeah, April 22nd for applications.
You got a month, right? So in a month, there's so much you can do, right? You can find a co-founder, you can do an MVP, you can get a survey done, you can get a wait list going and get like 5, 10,000, or even a few hundred um, wait list users. You can get some feedback from 10 early customers. You can post a paid ad in somewhere really far away, like for your B2C fintech app to be used by, consumers in Gujarat say, right, by using a targeted Facebook ad and just see what they say. If they uninstall it quickly because the app was too heavy and therefore you pivoted or you changed the app or something like that. They want to see some learning, something that you did that others did not. And this is the thing that I keep saying is if you just sit on your sofa at home with your, one or two people and you ideate and then apply, of course they kind of see that you didn't really make an effort, right? But if you did something, you coded, right? And if you pivoted that, and coming to the question of Mohan, if you pivoted, that's okay, but as long as you have some learnings to talk about. So talk about the learnings. Why did you pivot? Mention it, right? And if you're, of course, don't mention the whole thing about the old idea in across all the questions. Talk about it in one point. But then in your new idea, mention where you are, right? And do all the things that I said in the application. It's not too late. It's not too early to apply, even if you've pivoted. Even if you have no traction, that's okay. Ideally, you can do something now in the next few weeks to get traction, Mohit. Any one of the things I listed above. Yeah. I would not apply if you've just pivoted and it's 1 month before the deadline and you just urgently you're trying to submit today for some reason. I don't know why. Take a week. Take a week and try an experiment. Try something. Get a wait list going. All those things I said, and then apply. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to try and go back up to the top here. How can I get my app reviewed? I've submitted the form already. If you've already submitted the form on
We'll get
YC,
back.
I think they're saying anytime shoot is saying they've submitted on the YC or to Rise.
I think this is for Rize, since they've submitted
Okay.
it for a review. Folks,
Okay.
for anyone who submitted their application for a review, you'd be getting your review in the next week, in the upcoming week.
Okay. Sure. Does Rise take any equity? No. Okay. Let's go to the next one. When you say building MVP, is it okay if a founder can code a little and uses no code tools to build MVP and build revenue? It's okay to use no code tools. Ideally, again, someone should code, right? Ideally, that's the way they prefer. You may say, well, in this day and age, coding is less important, but I still think it's important to have one of the co-founders code, right? But it's okay, even if you don't apply and learn something and go through the application form. This is one of the things I have to emphasize. Doing the application form is an incredible learning experience. So do it as many times as possible. Yeah. And it's really well structured. Even if our startup is strong and our startup is I've answered that one. Revised question. What happens if a solo founder, but you're also a technical founder and have an MVP? DK says, well, yeah, as I said, solo, tech, and have an MVP. Apply, right? You're well situated. 1 in 10, I think, YC companies is a solo founder. And most of those folks are technical. Yeah. So apply, DK. YC themselves say alumni recommendations won't work. Why do they do that then? Anonymous says, I don't think that's true at all. I don't know where you read that. As far as I've read and heard and spoken to my partners, they strongly recommend getting worthy alumni recommendations, not just spraying and praying and getting like 100 of them and people don't know you, but alumni recommendations absolutely work. I know that for sure, right? So do get them if you can. How important is it to have a pedigree, IIM, FANG, and reality and not in YC marketing speak? It's not important at all, to have a pedigree, IIM, FANG. YC has open sourced their application process. There's no secrets, there's no tricks, there's no hacks. It's crazy simple. They've tried to make it ridiculously transparent, right? You could not find possibly any other VC in the world that has made it that transparent, right? There really is no hack or trick or pedigree that they're looking for here. Just apply regardless of your background, your social status, your education, your job, doesn't matter at all. What they're looking for is all of those things I wrote about. That said, of course, 1/3 of the current YC Indians are IIT grads. So that kind of defeats what I just said earlier, but it doesn't really if you think about it, because 2/3 are not. And it actually goes to say what I've suspected for a long time, and I kind of heavily involved in the YC India alumni community, which is that IoT alums make up a disproportionate uh, proportion of the applicant pool, right? And that's possibly another reason why I think they often get selected is because they apply in droves, right? And so, and many of the others do not. So I strongly encourage you to apply regardless of your background. There's absolutely no discrimination against non-IIT IMs. That's complete nonsense. For people who spread such rumors, I think that you just apply anyway. Yeah. Um, go
Another
ahead,
quick time check. It is noon. Are you okay to extend the session for a few more minutes?
Yeah, sure. I'm okay. Yeah. Should we try and
All
whiz
right.
through? I'll try and do like kind of fast fire answers. Okay. Guha Kashyap saying, what if technical co-founder isn't from a tech background, has worked to build the skills, especially by building an MVP? I think, um, it's harder, Guha. Like again, I emphasize try and find a technical co-founder, even if they can code and they're not an IIT grad and they're not a software engineer by training. That's okay. Many, many, many great software engineers are self-taught. That's okay as long as they can code. That's important. And I think if they just you're using no-code tools, that's not ideal, but it's still a start, right? Ideally, they can code, right? Anshuman Bansal. I've completed 1 year of building in my startup and don't have a tech co-founder. I was looking for someone planning to offer 15-20%. Does that make sense? No, it does not, Anshuman. Um, I don't know what 1 year you've been building, but no co-founder who's technical and self-respecting is going to come for 15%. So you really have to think twice about that, Anshuman. Please up your game. It's 10 years ahead, the journey. I think it makes much more sense to give close to half the company and don't worry about your equity getting diluted. The crazy thing here is that the pie is getting bigger, right? That's really the fundamental bottom line. The pie is getting bigger by giving them half the percent. So you should be delighted to give them up to half the company, regardless of the fact that you've been building for a year. Of course, if you got funding, you got 100 companies, you're already a six-figure run rate, that's a different story, but I'm not sure you're there yet. So, um, YC will invest in deep tech. Yes. Um, just having some research. Yeah, YC will invest in deep tech. In fact, they love deep tech. So what if it's not the idea? It's not built yet. As long as you have something to work on, some research, your PhD maybe, and you want to commercialize your PhD thesis, or you have some deep tech idea that you want to productize. Just do something to show that you're on the way. Yeah. Somnath Kandekar is asking, what if I don't have a technical co-founder, but I do have technical founding members? That does not help, Somnath. The only thing they are measuring you on is the team, not your employees. Yeah. And I don't know what you mean by founding members. I think you mean employees. But if it's like volunteers or contractors or dev shops or employees, it won't help you. What they really want to see is technical abilities of the founders themselves. Yeah. I strongly recommend that. Okay? Sparsh Saxena is saying, do they hold it against you if you're already having a full-time job while building your startup? Yes, this is a common question. Sparsh, I think you have to at some point pull the trigger, right? It's okay if you apply once and you're still in your job and you've kind of given notice and one of you is working full time on it, the other one's about to, something like that is a story that makes sense. If you're both in full-time jobs and you have no intention of leaving your job until YC gives you an admit, they can see right through that, and I don't think it helps a lot. But it's still possible, surprisingly. A large number of admits get through that way, right? Not a large number, but a good number. But I think what it really shows is a lack of appetite or conviction for you to build the idea that you're working on, and they can see that, right? They can see that you're on LinkedIn or whatever it is. They can see that you're not yet into this, and they can ask you, and you can't lie to them. So they can see that your conviction is not there, or you're not into it, or you're not both building, or one of you is at least not building. They can see that, and I think the odds just weigh against you, right? So, Sparsh, there's no absolute definitive answer to the question, but I think it just strongly helps if one of you is out of the full-time job and building, if not both of you, or if not more than one of you, if there's more than one or two founders, right? Arnav is saying we built the MVP without having any proper web dev background co-founder, but we have a co-founder with data science background. Arnav, as I said, yeah, deep tech is fine. Technical is good. No software engineer, as I've emphasized about 5 times already. Still not ideal, but just go ahead, apply, right? You have a data science co-founder. And if it's a deep tech idea, that's doable. That's something that they will work with, right? Sparsh is asking, and if you have no revenue attraction, what do you think should stand out most in the application apart from the founder's background? Again, Sparsh, I say there's no one singular thing. It's all the 12 things that I wrote in that doc, right? And if you think it's one singular thing, that it's like, the straw that broke the camel's back, right? There are 20 other straws weighing down on the camel's back, right? So it's not just the one straw, right? Pile the straws onto the camel's back and the camel will break, right? And how do you do that? Follow everything I wrote in that doc. Yeah. Anonymous says, is it okay to have a demo based on a sandbox rather than real-time data? Yes, absolutely. You do not require licenses, especially in fintech in India. You do not require that you can use a sandbox. Absolutely no problem. In fact, they love the idea that you're using sandbox testing, ideating. That's all perfect. You got off your backside and did something rather than just, saying, oh, we're going to build this. Right? Somnath says having signups on the platform does not, but not coming from real, will it be considered traction? I don't know what that means. Do you mean fake signups? Obviously, fake signups are not cool, right? Avoid that at all costs. They can, that's not legitimate. That's not honest. And if they see that, they will, of course, blacklist you. So please don't do that. I'm not sure that's what you meant, Somnath, but I think what you're saying is, if they're not real users, they're just, maybe what you mean is they're not real users, but they're just testing the platform or something. That's okay. As long as there's users on the platform, that's great that they're testing out, they're using in some way, as long as they're not, even if they're not paying users. Right? Rana Chatterjee is saying, how much money can be made? Is there a minimum expectation they have? Yes, really good, really good. Completely missed that in my Word doc, which I will add now, Rana, is that they must be convinced that there is a path to $100 million run rate, right? Let me put that path to $100 million run rate, right? If they do not believe that, you are an automatic reject, right? Why? Because without that, there is absolutely no chance that they will get a return on their investment. So they're not a charity. They're not like, oh, they actually give grants to charities in each batch, I think 5 or 10 charities. They're not a charity. They're a VC fund. They need a clear path to $100 million run rate, ideally, to become a unicorn, where they can make a ton, right? So they must believe that there is that path, and the only way that they can believe that is if they can see that there is a large market chasing after. YC again and again and again says if there's no large market, but it's a great idea, this is not venture backable, it's a service company or it's a bootstrap company, sorry, a lifestyle company. That's all great. It's just that it's not their cup of tea, right? So they really need to be convinced. And they've said as well, TAM comes before team, product, and everything else. TAM first, right? If the addressable market is very small, even if this is like an idea of a wedge, the idea of wedge is very small, right? That's okay. As long as the bigger market that they go chasing is big enough to achieve a $100 million run rate and they're convinced of that, that's super important. If you can't show that, you're automatically excluded. It's probably the most important point. Thank you, Rana. Is it required to have distinction of roles in founders and co-founders? Yes. Please, please, please do not do deputy CEO or co-CEO. That's in my eyes just a really bad idea. One of you is the CEO, one of you is the CTO. If there's more, one of you is the COO, CBO, CMO, whatever you wish. CEO and CTO are clearly two defined roles, which I think just make perfect sense. That's my strong personal opinion. I think YC has said that as well. When you try to share CEO hats this early on, it's just usually a mess. So don't try that. Tavishi Jain is asking, I'm not technical, but my co-founder is. His background is AI. Other than us, we do have two other people, a developer and a data scientist. They aren't co-founders, but more like founding members. They do have below 10%. If they don't have 10%, they can't be in the application form. 10% is the threshold. They aren't considered co-founders. So then the only people that YC is going to look at is you and your co-founder who has more than 10%. They will not look at the employees. So as long as you both have the right things with you, characteristics with you, I think and in the video and they see and one of you is technical, I think makes perfect sense, Tawishi. I wouldn't worry too much about your employees for the purpose of this application form because YC is not going to take you or reject you based on your employees by 0.1%. Okay. Kashiki Prajapat is asking if we do have an app, Does it have to be an app store to make a difference? Ideally, yes. Kashika, if it's not in the app store, who's using it? Ideally, you have 100, 200, 500 users. You could do a mobile app which isn't in the app store, but someone's using it in test flight or something like that. But ideally, someone's using it, right? And by the way, it's okay to have 100 users uh, who are actively using the product. That's about twice as good or 10 times as good as having 20,000 users who don't use the product, right? So please don't emphasize on number of downloads. YC doesn't at all emphasize on that. Of course, if you have 1 million downloads, then of course it says something. But ideally you haven't bought them all or you haven't like purchased downloads. But even if you have, and the DAO or the WOW or the MAU is very, very low, they can tell that, right? They'll ask you and you can't lie. So ideally you kind of have some users, and even if it's a small number of users with high retention is more important than downloads. Yeah. Um, why is the alum? Who's the alum who recommend you matters? Yes, it does. Not matter too much, but it does matter if you know them. It doesn't have to be someone rich and famous and etc. It has to be someone you know, right? Ideal number of recommendations. I think a couple, at least 2 or 3, makes sense. Don't go more than 5. If you're going north of 10, it's just wasting your time and everyone else's time. Yeah. Is there a disadvantage of being B2C than B2B? No, absolutely not. In the AI space, I don't think it makes a difference. AI often people associate with B2B. At this stage, I don't think it makes any difference whether you're B2C or B2B. YC is a prolific backer of B2C startups. Most of the big ones in India, which they backed, Meesho and Grow, are all B2C, right? AI in the B2B or B2C space, I don't think it matters. There are great products out there like Perplexity, which are B2C, frankly, as much as I can understand. So I think it doesn't make a difference. Yeah. Me and my co-founder are in the US, but we're building something out for India. Do you think it hurts our chances if we are not in India? Um, I think it would help if you were in India, if you're building for India, or if you can explain that you have the intention, because in the application form it says, where are you right now? Where will you be after the batch? So you can write, where are we right now? Or in, whatever, you're in America studying and moving to Bangalore after the batch. So as long as you can be truthful about that, I think it's fine. Rahul Chavan is saying, I'm solo non-tech. I've been looking for a tech co-founder, but have not found one yet. But I've been executing, building an MVP traction. How should I go about this? Certainly, I'll not be able to find a tech co-founder before the application deadline. Does applying solo with early users and traction help? So again, Rahul, I've answered this quite a few times in different ways. I'll answer it in the similar way for you, Rahul, is try to find a tech co-founder. Use the YC co-founder matching tool. It's brilliant. I found my co-founder there and he's an absolute rock star. And so just try. You got a month, right? Even if you don't get one in the next month, apply anyway, Rahul. Um, ideally you'll have a tech co-founder. The fact that you're able to be hacky, get some users, it helps, right? And then the next batch, perhaps you found a co-founder along the way, and then they can see you applied a few times, and now you have a co-founder because you added them in the portal. So it helps. So Rahul, apply anyway. Does launching on Product Hunter help? Yes, it can help. They may look at it, especially if you achieve the high ranking. I don't think it's the only thing, Arnav, that helps. I think it can help. I think it's important if you have some users and some traction on Product Hunt. Personally, I feel a lot of Product Hunt is very kind of, you know, anyway, I won't go into that, but you can game it in some ways, although they say you can't. But I find most people who upvote or comment are not your users, so it's a bit of a weird thing. But I think it helps if you can go high into Product Hunt rankings and you push it up and you mention it. It's just another feather in your cap. It's not the singular thing that's going to get you over the line, but it's just another feather in your cap, right? Okay. Cheryl, any other important ones you can see?
We can take maybe one last question. Folks, go and upvote the question that you want the most, and that will be our last question for today.
Chetan's asking, how does alumni recommendations work? You just get a friend, an alum friend, and they apply online. You just give them your Hacker News ID and username, and they give you some comment. They give some comments on the application form. They don't need to do it before the deadline. They can even do it after the deadline. Ideally, they do it before the application's read. So ideally, shortly after the deadline, because you don't want to leave it a month after the deadline, because someone would have read the application by then. So ideally as soon as possible. You don't need to mention it in the application form. There's no space to mention it. Or the alumni just use your Hacker News email address. hacker news username and email address to match you. You just give them that and some idea about what you're building. Sorry, I think is there any strongly upvoted question here?
Just one, I think. Does launching on product hunt help in YC?
I think I already answered that
Yeah,
one.
yeah. I think it's done.
Yeah.
Can Kashika's asking, can multiple founders from the same YC company give recommendations? Yes, they can, Kashika, of course. I don't think it matters too much. Yeah. Ram is asking, can my girlfriend be one of the 3 co-founders? You don't need to mention that. It's perfectly fine not to mention that. So you can exclude that in the application form. Jay is asking, we are 2 co-founders, one CEO, one CDO. The CEO handles tech. We don't have a CTO. Do we need to fix this narrative? Jay, as I said, try to find a software coding technical co-founder, software engineer. Yeah. But it's okay if you don't have that right now. Just apply anyway, and ideally, when you apply again, or they will consider you anyway. Do you need to incorporate before you start applying? Absolutely not. In fact, Paul Graham famously says, "Do not incorporate for as long as possible." Right? So you do not need to. They will help you. YC helps you incorporate, etc. So you don't need to. Is
All right.
YC? Yeah.
Just
Okay.
as we are wrapping up, I'm just going to quickly launch a poll so everyone can answer the quick poll for us. And yeah, Anand, you can continue answering whatever questions you want to.
Okay, sure. Uh, uh, Alternates to YC in case we get rejected. Oh gosh, that's a difficult one. I think you build. That's the alternative. Noel Jacob, you just build. YC is, in fact, this is a great one, Noel. YC is not is it does change your life. It changed my life, and it was 2 companies ago. It's a lifelong club. It's brilliant. I love it. The community is amazing. It has great benefits to your company, to your life, to your co-founders, to your family, to your employees, to your customers. But it's not the be all and end all. Right? You keep building. If you have high conviction, build, and there'll be others who will back you and who will build the conviction to back you. So just for God's sake, build, and do everything that YC tells you to do, and you'll be successful anyway, even if you don't do the program. Do the startup school though. It's free and it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Please, I don't know if Manik or Cheryl, if you can encourage folks to do startup school, but it's an amazing MOOC, right?
Yeah.
Massive open
Yeah.
online course. Definitely do it. Right? Okay. How is YC verifying that your the co-founder is technical? They're not verifying anything, right? They don't have time. They look at the application form. They look at the the LinkedIn's maybe, right? But generally they don't. But honestly, if you're caught lying, it's like absolutely blacklisted, and there's unfortunately been incidents of that. So don't lie about anything in the application form. It's like an automatic, rejection and blacklisting. And even if you get into the batch and then they find out later, this is famous. Why is it famous? Because they really do almost no due diligence, right? Sometimes though they may ask you for some proof of some LOIs after the interview and say, show us some evidence that you've got some of these things, and they just do a little bit of checking, sometimes even a little bit more nowadays. But I don't think it's too much, but absolutely you should kind of stick to the playbook. Yeah. Okay. I think that's everything. How much traction is required? Say if it's 100 users, is it enough? Yeah, like it doesn't matter. Even if it's 10 users, if it's B2B. If it's B2C, ideally 100, 50, 100, doesn't matter. It's absolutely fine to have very low number of users, as long as you've shown that you've learned something, you got off your backside, you did something, you coded something, you tried an experiment, you put a really crappy basic MVP out there. That's more than half of the companies that apply. Half of the companies who apply have literally nothing, right? And they are not automatically rejected, but most of them are, right? So, you're literally getting into the top half just by doing something more than that.
All right.
Okay.
So shall we call it?
Let's call it. I'm sorry I spoke very fast, everyone. If you didn't catch everything, there's a recording. And let me again share this doc. I've shared the doc, and I'm also going to share my LinkedIn ID. Oops, I shared it in the wrong one. Sorry. There's my LinkedIn, and there's the document. Cheryl, please feel free to distribute that document.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Thank you so much, Anand. Thank you so much for your time. Folks, hope you enjoyed this session. We will be sharing a recording of this in the upcoming week. In case you haven't, do sign up for Rise for YC so you will be updated on all the updates that are coming in the upcoming weeks. Quick reminder, Rise for YC application review deadline is on April 15th, while the YC deadline is April 22nd. So we have exactly about a month. So let's get there. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Manik. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Anand. Thank you.